What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy Malik Washington coming back to you live for the first time of the year of 2025 for another episode of the Breaking Mental Barriers. How you ladies and gentlemen doing this fine day or evening wherever you all reside? I appreciate each and every one of you who comes on to this podcast and you're listening to this video as we currently speak. I know we're obviously about a good 14, 15 days into the new year. So apologies for not having been here prior to that, but happy new year to you all. I guess you could say late new year in this case. But I'm here and I have a lot of time on my hands to be able to discuss the things I'd like to discuss on this channel, on this podcast. This is the place that I come to when I want to get my thoughts out and speak my mind, tell the truth, be honest. Uh, Most times I'm doing a lot of listening. I don't really do a lot of the talking for the most part because I'm more so trying to understand the world than trying to dictate it and how it should be when that's not the way the reality of our uh, world is on planet Terra, and we have to navigate it the way that we know how, the way that we know best, whatever that looks like, depending on the person that you speak to. Everyone's situation is different, and therefore, there's really no cause to, I guess you could say, place everyone in one size fits all narrative. So, your wisdom, my wisdom, or anyone else's wisdom, it's not going to always hold water for everyone. It just depends on what it is. Some people's situations are complex, so it requires more of comprehensive review of how their lives are lived and how they go about navigating their life and how they're handling their situations. And another thing to consider is that we're not all familiar with everyone's situation, so sometimes it's best to humble ourselves and listen to what others have to say so we can kind of gauge where they're coming from, even if we can't necessarily provide a respective solution to their specific issues related to life, right? But that is neither here nor there. I come to you today to talk about this, and it's been kind of brought up as of late on other podcasts, I guess you could say, especially within the dating realm, when we're having discussions about um, some of these women dating certain types of men, certain brackets of men who are of a much more higher value than, let's say, your average man that may make between 40 to 50,000 a year, right? Um, this conversation is interesting, but it's also personable to me to a certain extent because I guess I fit within this group, and we often get labeled, losers, lames, squares, in Gen X terms. I typically hear Gen X people usually say call us squares. They call, I guess in my generation, the millennials, they will call them lames and different things like that. They still do to this day. And it's quite interesting when people who are not lames or people who did not grow up in that kind of dynamic love to talk about the lame, the nerd, you name it, right? And it's interesting to hear the other side's perspective on the matter. But I dare to wonder if there's someone out there who's willing to talk about the loser's side of the matter, right? Because the ones who write the narrative, the ones who I guess who are the it people, the ones that had it all growing up, they were privileged in the sense socially to the point to where, they didn't have to deal with the bullying, they didn't have to deal with being shunned, they didn't have to deal with being ostracized or anything like that because they were either smart or they were different or they had unique personalities or They weren't so weird as some people would denote if you didn't think how they thought about life, things like that. Sometimes I think some of these people are very one-sided in their way of thinking, but when you have linear-minded people like that who think that everything should go their way because that's the way their personalities work against everyone else's, then we start to get into these confirmation biases where we think everyone has to be as tough or insensitive or as holish as they are in order to make it into the world, when the world is a variety of a little bit of everybody. It's not just insensitive people. It's not just uh bad people. It's not just people who are into sports. There are people out here who do a lot of different things outside of what your circle loves to do. You know, there's more than people who just love to have sex, do drugs, have a whole lot of friends, go to parties. There are people who do the complete opposite and don't necessarily subscribe to it and probably live rather decent lives, as opposed to constantly putting themselves in this loop of escapism that everyone seems to want to live in when life gets tough, right? Nothing wrong with a little escapism here and there, of course. But these people seem to think that, of course, well, if you don't do what they do, then you're not living, right? So you're probably wondering, and this is just a little short monologue to segue into what I want to talk about. And you're probably wondering, like, what the hell are you diving into? Well, the title of this episode is, even though the nice guy finishes last, he finishes first in other instances of his or her life. I'll say that again for those of you who didn't hear it. The title of this episode is, though the nice guy finishes last, he finishes first in other instances of his life. Now, before I give my opinion on what it is I want to talk about, I want to share a video. I'm going to use my phone here because I didn't have my other light source with me today. So I'm kind of winging this, but we're bear with me, right? I'm going to put it back up so that you guys can see my face a lot better in this unfortunate contrast that I have right now. But this video is from, it's a reel. It's nothing too long, but essentially it's a short reel from this woman who is affiliated with another black guy's podcast I listen to, um who typically talks about a little bit of everything, does the whole news cycle, goes into different stories. He talks about money. He goes into a little bit of everything. He's a very opinionated guy for the most part. But yeah, he's affiliated with this black woman who does this show, and she invites him along with a few other people that are known. They seem to be like Gen Xers, if I'm not mistaken. So they kind of have some Gen Xers perspectives about life, and you know how that goes for all of you Gen Xers out there that might potentially be listening to this. But she basically, they were talking about the nerd and how the nerd goes about expressing himself and his choices in life, and why women who were the it factor from way back when would reject them, and they would go for the people who were the drug dealers, the badasses, the road guys, the ones with the sin under their belts, that that gets the downstairs flooded, if you get what I mean. For YouTube's sake, y'all get where I'm coming from. For the adults in the room, for the kids, uh you know stay in school, don't worry about what I'm talking about. But yeah, I'm gonna play this video. You're gonna hear the sound. I will share the link in the description so you all can look at the short reel yourself in case you want to go back and reference it, to get a visualization of what she looks like and all of that. But this is what she essentially says, and I want y'all to hear it. Then I'm gonna give my take on afterwards. When the nerd came up to the girl in high school, she was like, "Ugh, no, I don't want you." And then once she became a baby mama, he was a CEO executive and all that. And she's like, "Hey, you remember me?" He said, "Ugh, no, I don't want you." I be feeling like, respectfully, y'all is the grown up versions of the niggas that got hurt in high school while we was out fucking with the drug dealers. Let me tell you something. We were victims then, making horrible ass decisions with grown ass niggas preying on us. Y'all gotta let that
shit go. What about the girls who had the older guys picking them up in high school? Get the fuck over it. Right.
Okay. All right. A new report from Reuters today. Oops, sorry about that. So I'm gonna put this light source back over here. All right. So and we're gonna get it together, ladies and gentlemen. I used to just show the video on screen and then we would transition right on over, but I apologize about that. I haven't been using my video editing software, and since this is a new laptop after all, I've been just trying to set things up, get things together a little bit better. But soon I will be doing that. I actually know how to do it. I'm a little bit lazy, and besides, I just came here to do a quick video anyway. It's nothing too extensive. But so you all heard what she basically said, right? That the guy who was the nerd, who's currently complaining about how a lot of these women who they were the it girls, they suddenly now seem to have this unseeming attraction to the nerds. The nerds apparently grew up, and in her example that she gave, she was talking about a nerd who knowingly rejected a woman who apparently was attractive or was popular back in her day, but apparently she didn't want him at that time frame. Later on, because she was dealing with, as you heard, the drug dealer or the older guy that was, as the other lady mentioned, that would pick up these girls, these young high school girls in cars and drive them wherever they drive them, and they do what they do, right? But then later on, apparently these girls get wise. They apparently they know their worth, and y'all know how these women are these days, talking about work, self-worth, self-care, self-love, and they've suddenly gotten this epiphany. They're all suddenly religious. They all suddenly realize that they need decent men. But then once you learn about the decisions that she's made over the course of her life, she's not the same woman that you knew, obviously, 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago when she was at her best. When she wasn't so hung up on economic strains, she wasn't a liability, she wasn't so caught up in herself. She actually had everything going. You both were damn near the same age, if not maybe a year or two old. She might have been a year or two older than you. It depends on who it is, right? But now all of a sudden she's into you after she had her fun with the guy who wasn't deserving of what she currently had. I mean, of what she had when she was a young woman and she was at her prime. And so now the nerd is assessing the situation, analyzing it, and saying, well, no, I don't want you now. And then apparently it's a crime, it's a bad thing if you reject her, because at one point she rejected you. And now that she's coming back to you and saying, I now want you after all these years, now you're supposed to, again, as my favorite thing to say is, bow to their every whim. And you're now supposed to just take her for all that she is. When she decided to she chose the path she chose when she was a young lady. And now she wants to now bring you into her pasture after she's had sex with multiple partners. She's had she's got multiple baby fathers. She's got multiple kids. She's economically strained. She she has a lot of mental issues that she never addressed. She's probably had them since she was popular, but nobody ever told her she was wrong. Because you can't tell a lot of these girls shit these days, especially even now. You couldn't even tell them that in high school. They were assholes. I should know. A lot of people who are like me and similar, who have been in a similar dynamic as me in school, they should know. Let me explain something. And I'm trying not to get too passionate because I'm already in a foul mood from some other things that are going on in my life right now, but that's neither here nor there. We're gonna leave that where it's at before I go off. But I'd rather go off on this than to go off on that, because that's over with. It's a water under the bridge, and I'm moving on and evolving, etc., etc. Nonetheless, this whole thing about nerds, right? The ones that y'all seldom paid attention to back in school, the ones who focused on their work. They were not bothering you, but For some reason, some humans seem gung ho about picking on these people that don't do shit to you, but actually try to focus on their work. The ones who were not so quick to sleep with every fucking thing walking, the ones who did not want to do drugs with everybody that came into the school, the ones who did not want to get blessed in and gang banging. And I'm just speaking from the perspective of being around the circle that I was around, the people that I went to school with. This is the shit that they were dealing with. That the fact that we didn't want to come across as being like the crowd, for some reason that made us a target, right? Being someone that was in the books, someone that was trying to be something in life, trying to be the person God, if you believe in him, God wants us to be, what our parents and or grandparents want us to be, not trying to be a fuck up in society, and of course aspiring to get into the careers and the dreams that we all had growing up, whether if it was being a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse, an engineer, whatever the case may be, a teacher, a real estate agent, you name it. We were trying to focus on being those things. And apparently, because we looked a certain way, or we had an appeal that wasn't so comely, unlike our famous counterparts, that is, our popular counterparts, that is, our more, I guess you could say, socially acceptable counterparts, that is, we were the ones that had to get shunned, bullied, verbally abused, physically abused, all these different things, and then told at the end of the day, perhaps we're just the weakest links. We don't mean anything to anybody. We wouldn't amount to anything. All these different things. The nerd, and let me say this, nerds are not a monolith. And that goes without saying for practically any group that you're speaking to. Nerds are not a monolith. We're not all the same. And I don't believe we all experience the same amount of punishment for being nerds either. You got your nerds that are street smart as well as book smart. You got your nerds that are strictly book smart. You have your nerds that are comely, yet they're not so, I guess you could say, particular about expressing how smart they are. So you have the people who have the looks, they even have the brains, but they tend to not really express it that well because I guess that's not something that is appealing to society and they recognize it. So they don't really express it as much. You have that nerd. You have the nerd that will stand up for his or herself. In other words, they'll fight you. And they're not going to take no shit from you if you mess with them. You also have the nerds who don't mess with anybody. And they're just trying to get coast through their education. But those are the ones that get a lot of the flack. You then also, and I have to say it for these, and I think these are some of the ones they call squares. You have some of the nerds who are assholes. In other words, it's the nerd that thinks he's so smarter than everybody that he thinks that when he speaks, nobody can completely understand where he's coming from. His high IQ is so high and mighty that nobody can really comprehend what he's saying. So then he ends up meeting his maker by someone wanting to physically abuse him because somebody thinks he's not worth a damn. Because they can't battle him intellectually, they battle with his face physically. So with that being said, you have that nerd too. So I understand that there is a dynamic and there are specific identifiers within nerds that can be categorically different than other nerds that we're speaking about. But if we're talking about the nerds who actually genuinely tried to be social, who genuinely tried to get to know people outside of themselves in their own groups, who actually tried to shoot their shot like the typical boy would, I would imagine. Apparently, the it girl didn't give two shits about him. The thing is about trying to be the better person, and in this case, I guess it would be the nerd, is that the nerd is not trying to be like everyone else. The nerd is trying to be higher and better than everyone else so he can live a better life, a comfortable life for him and his family. The nerd is no different than your average working class man who's working in construction, carpentry, or they're an electrician or doing custodial work. They simply want to get somewhere because society is a rough place. They're utilizing the gift that God gave them so that they can go out here and make something of society and perhaps even contribute to making life more convenient for people like yourselves who like to go around and just bully people because they think and act differently than you. Whoever the hell you are out there listening to this video, and you were one of those people back in the day that did that type of shit, right? And the thing is, the reason why the nerds are not checking for people like this sister here who wants to sit here and say, well, y'all need to get over it because we were preyed upon by older men. First off, didn't your parent again, not knowing everyone's situation, but if you have parents, hypothetically speaking, ladies and gentlemen, do not your parents tell you not to talk to strangers? Or is that just not a thing anymore? I could be wrong. But the last time I recall, if an older man is talking to you and they're like literally either five, I wouldn't even say five, maybe about 8 to 10 years older than you, riding around in rich or affluent vehicles, and they're sitting there telling you that they want to ride you around, they want to take you places, they want to do things with you, and you fall prey to it. And you then want the nerd who is a CEO or who has become better than the boy that he was when he was in high school. You want him to believe that you were victimized for choosing to date older men, choosing to date the guy who you knew was a gangbanger, who you knew was a drug dealer, who you knew was doing all this horrible shit. And you expect him to then just get over the fact that you willingly, not mistakenly, you willingly chose to be with that man. And that when you saw the image, when you saw all of the opulence and the decadence that this drug dealer had from his get rich quick money, you suddenly looked at this young nerd and you said, you can't amount to anything that this guy can. And y'all don't only just do that with drug dealers. Stop it. And again, that's Gen X. But I even know it even coming from a very rudimentary point of being in school. The girls were not checking for nerds. Nobody wants to talk to the nerd that simply knows a lot about a particular topic. Again, damn near anyone can be a nerd. A person that loves sports, whether if it's in basketball, football, soccer, you name it, uh, all these different sports, they can be nerds in what they're doing. I would even say when it comes to sports analytics, Stephen A. Smith knows his shit. Shaquille O'Neal knows his shit. Emmanuel Acho knows his shit. These are the people I would consider nerds, despite the fact they may not even have the look of the stereotypical nerd that everyone knew back in school. But nonetheless, those are nerds. And you know why? Because what does it simply mean to be a nerd? It means to be someone who has an expertise in a subject matter. That's it. That's literally it. And yet, because you knew more than the average Joe, you would get bullied. You would not get chosen. You would not get accepted because you knew more than the other people. I was one of those nerds and got picked on for my entire academic career because I knew more than the average person, because I was different than the average person in my class, because I didn't want to deal with a bunch of riffraff that every moment they got to get every single moment they got to get downstairs flooded, and because they got to do drugs and they got to party and they got to do all this nonsense that was unrelated to their education, and yet I cared about mine. I got picked on for it. I was also One of the ones who would shoot my shot. I actually didn't have a problem with it. I would shoot my shot at women. That was the natural thing to do as a young man for me. And granted, I didn't have my father in my life at that time. My father didn't come into my life until I was 22, 23 years old. Nonetheless, I had enough of a masculine instinct in me to shoot my shot at girls when I was in school. And at the end of the day, I got turned down. I got turned down. Cute, but you're not my type. Oh, I got a boyfriend. You're not somebody I'm not really checking for. But then come to find out, their partners, it made perfect sense. Some of these girls had gangbangers for boyfriends. Some of these girls, like what that lady mentioned, they had drug dealers for boyfriends. Some of them grew up in broken homes. So the mentality that a lot of these young ladies had about nerds or boys who were smart, they weren't checking for them. These boys weren't interesting. They weren't fast enough. They weren't the short term guy that was willing to go out there, be intimidating, be an asshole, treat people like shit. These girls were attracted to toxicity in some of these men. That's what they wanted. And now that they've gotten older, they now want to preach to the world, well, nobody wants me and there's no good guys. There actually are good guys. You all willingly ignored them. And a lot of these good guys, especially now, are much more aware they're not checking for you. They don't want you. And because they have increased their value as men, they're not looking at you as somebody that is worth anything when they could have had you when you weren't so jaded, when you weren't so experienced in life in every single aspect because you wanted to wild out and make your mistakes early and young. You all have laid your path. You might as well stay on it because with the way that the course of which you take, and this is not to say that some of y'all who have screwed yourselves up can't get halfway decent men. But I would surmise that it would be extremely difficult for you to deal with the guy who you rejected and you made an afterthought because you told him in the beginning he was not worth you. He wasn't worth your body. He wasn't worth your mind. He wasn't worth any of that. Now he's just like, I don't need you. I have everything that I want. I have a family. I have a wonderful career. I make money. I don't give a shit about you anymore. Because when I was trying to check for you at a time of which I had little to nothing, but I had my smarts, you didn't want that. So now the nerd is saying, fuck you. And I don't blame the nerd for doing that because I would do just the same. If you came to me and you were one of the people in my life who rejected me in the fucking beginning, and when I tried to come for you, you told me I wasn't worth a damn. You were one of the people, in fact, by association, who was a part of the bullying ring that was fucking with me. And some of the popular girls were a part of that. But then you expect the nerd to come back and accept that? The hell with you. It's real talk. To hell with you and whatever it is that you're coming with now, because all of a sudden, Jesus came down from the heavens and he suddenly changed you. You're redeemed. No, 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 no. You're still a human being. You still need help as a woman. And especially if you're a single parent, single mother at that, I surmise it's pretty difficult to raise that child without his father. Now you want me to be stepdaddy and you want me to look at that child that doesn't even look anything like me. It does not belong to me. Now, granted, I'm not speaking for every man. Some men will do that. They will take on another child that doesn't look like them, and that's fine. That's you. More power to you. Most men want a woman who they can say is theirs, and that woman made a child with them specifically that looks like them, not someone else. looking like they're just serving the woman at her every given mistake. And now you have to look at this child and you're like, it's nothing against you, but that's not what I wanted from the mother. That child is not who I wanted from the mother. I wanted my own child. Now I can't get that out of this it girl because she gave it to someone else. And that was your choice. But then don't expect me to take my choice and lower it in order to meet a demand that you were never willing to give me when you were at your prime. You don't make the demands here anymore. You lost that. And the nerd deserves all the best in the world because he put himself forth. And this goes for the women too who were nerds. I'm not just speaking about the men, the women, the girls as well. They deserve to get the best of the best if someone else decides to take them. They do. We may be last. Socially, we might be last. But we will always come first in other instances. And why? Because we worked hard to get to where we wanted to be in life. We did. We wanted to aspire to be the best for the potential candidate that comes along and says, I want to marry this person. I want to be with them. And the only thing I say to you, ladies and gentlemen out there, to my nerds, keep your standards. Stay true to who you are. Fuck these people that sit up here and condemn you or shame you for not choosing them because they lived a life where they rejected you. They took on the rogue guy. And because the rogue guy could not be controlled and be made into the idea of you, now they suddenly want to come to the real thing and ask him to take or her to take them in their arms. No, tell them to go back to where they came from, back to the guy that they were sleeping with that never married them. Ask him to take your hand in marriage. Ask him to bow to your every whim. You're not going to make him do it though, but you're going to make me. You're going to set the expectation on me. Yeah, nah, nah, man, that's not going to happen. But I'm gonna cut it short. We gone past 30 minutes. The video was supposed to be 15. I went even further. But I had a lot to get off my chest about this particular topic. There were other things I was going to dive into, but I'm like, yeah, y'all don't need to know about that. It's none of your concern. At the end of the day, it's a lot going on this end. I know I'm sitting here and I'm putting a smile on my face, but deep down, I am in a foul mood. I genuinely am. And like I say, I thought I'd come on here, get it off my chest about this particular topic at hand, and give y'all some perspective. And hopefully, y'all talk back to me if you have an opinion on it. If you don't, I understand there are other things that are going on in the world that are extremely important, such as the LA wildfires that are happening. And my condolences to the people that have lost the things that they have lost over there in California. It's a horrific situation. I hate it for you all. But there is something I do want to say behind that, and that is pick better candidates, pick a better administration. Stop choosing the same people in order to get the same results, ladies and gentlemen. You all who are over there in California, get your shit in order. Start choosing better people. California has had these Santa Ana winds for years. They have had these fires for every year. It should not be anything new. It should be similar to how people in Florida deal with hurricanes or how people in the Midwest deal with tornadoes. And I understand that it's only so much the citizens can do because we do have resources that are supposed to be allocated and distributed when these emergencies happen. But ladies and gentlemen, you have to choose a better. You have to be careful and you have to choose better. I know you like who you like, you love who you love, and y'all want your lifestyles. But sometimes your life matters over your lifestyle. Choose life. Don't choose death over a little bit of escapism, a little bit of drugs, a little bit of sex, and all this other stuff that California indulges in at at a rate beyond repair. So that's all I'm going to say behind that. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Malik Washington. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a good day or good night wherever you reside, and I thank you for listening if you got this far. Stay tuned until the next episode. With this, I say peace. Till next time.